Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. I will post a tutorial every week on this channel to explain the assignments and to explain why I want you to do the assignments, what the lesson is I want you to get out of this week's work. So this week, I want you to learn three things. We're reading Paul Revere's Ride, and from that poem, I want you to understand it. I want you to understand its historical context, and I want you to understand why artists make art. So, in order for you to understand the poem, you really have to do the hard work of going through and stanza by stanza, trying to figure out what the poem is saying. So, I have you paraphrasing it. So, I don't know if you guys know what a stanza is. If this was a classroom, I'd just ask you, but it's not a classroom, so. This shows you what the stanzas are. So this first grouping is like a paragraph. That's one stanza. And then there's a gap, and then there's another grouping of lines, and then another gap. That's the second stanza. Third, this long grouping is the fourth stanza. In total, there are 14 stanzas. So that's a lot. So I broke it up into 2 days. On the first day, you will paraphrase the first 7 stanzas, and you should be able to find that assignment on Google Classroom. The second day, you're going to paraphrase the last half, so stanza 8 through 14. And then that brings us to the second goal, which is that you will understand the historical context of this poem. So Paul Revere was a Revolutionary War hero, but he was written about right before the Civil War. So this poem is actually more about the Civil War than the Revolutionary War, because when Longfellow wrote it, he wanted you to care about slavery, and he wanted you to feel patriotic, and he wanted you to take up the fight with the North to go fight slavery. We know this about Longfellow because he was a known abolitionist. So an abolitionist is someone who fights actively against slavery. And Longfellow was one of these people. He wrote a lot of poetry before this poem about slavery and about the evils of slavery. So if you got this poem in 1860 and you saw that it was written by Longfellow, you would immediately be aware that this might be about slavery and the fight against slavery. And given that it was right before the Civil War and there was all this tension building, when you read it, you'd be reading it with that lens of imminent war. And you'd be looking for inspiration in this poem. And so the second assignment I gave you after paraphrasing, sorry, I have really bad allergies. The second assignment was for you to read the New York Times article called Paul Revere's Ride Against Slavery. In that article, Jill Lepore talks about really what the motivation that Longfellow had behind writing this poem, and that was to create patriotism, to create bravery in his fellow Northerner, so that they would take up this fight against the South. And then after you read that article, you're going to go back to the poem, and you're going to find spots in the poem where you think it's a metaphor for slavery, and you're going to quote it. You need to find 3 quotes, 3 places where you feel like he's actually talking about slavery, not about Paul Revere. So that's, going to be a challenge, and I think you're up to it, though. I think you can do it. You guys are very good at doing that kind of activity. I've noticed that about you. So the last point I want to hit on is that this poem, Paul Revere's Ride, is not incredibly accurate. And Longfellow has been criticized for that. But I would say that Longfellow was not trying to teach you about history when he wrote this poem. He was trying to elicit an emotion from you. And when you do your art, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about what emotion are you trying to create in your viewer and in your reader. This week I assigned to you to do journaling, and I actually want you to do journaling for the whole rest of your quarantine. I'd like you to do it every day. But when you write your journal, I don't want you to be thinking, how accurately can I represent this historical event, my historical day? I want you to be thinking, before you write, what emotion do I want to portray in this entry? And then think, well, what story from today will teach my reader that I felt lonely? Or what story from today would teach my reader that I felt very liberated or very free, or that I felt very happy today? The starting point is the emotion. When you draw, when you paint, your starting point should be, what emotion do I want the viewer to have? It would influence what colors you chose, the way you draw the face, the angle of the figures in the portrait. So it's important that you understand that good art comes from teaching an emotion. That's always the starting point. The last thing I want you to do this week is to read every day. And I would really like you to read for 1 hour every day. For some of you, that might be hard because you might not have a lot of books. One place that you could find electronic books would be on the library website. You can go on there and get a library card, and then you can go onto your phone and get an app called the Libby app, Libby. And with that app, you can get electronic books. If you like to listen to audiobooks, you can listen to audiobooks while you draw. That's something that my family really likes to do. And right now, audible.com is free for all students for the next 3 months. So if you go on there and sign up for it with your school email, then it will come up that that's a school website, or that's a school email, and they will give you free Audible. Then you can listen to all kinds of audiobooks. There's another app, and it's also a website that you can go to called LibriVox. It's see if I can spell that right. Librivox, LibriVox. And those are older stories, but they're all before copywriting. So it's called the public domain, and so it's all free. So you can go on there, and there's some really good stories on there. Mark Twain is on there. I personally love Mark Twain because that's all before copywriting, so it can be open to the public. Okay, well, I really miss you guys, and that's genuine. I truly miss you. I went back to the school a few weeks ago to get my stuff, and it felt horrible because there was no kids there. It was a Friday. And so I could go back this Friday, but I didn't go back this last Friday because I didn't want to, because it would be weird. So I just really miss you, and I'm enjoying my own kids, but in my ideal world, we could all just be together. So this is really weird for me to be separated from people. I'm not at all. I'm a very social person. I want just to have people around me all the time. So it's pretty weird, but I'm doing well, and I've developed all kinds of hobbies, and hopefully you have too. And hopefully you're staying healthy and enjoying your time with your family and going on lots of walks and getting exercise. So have a good week. Enjoy Paul Revere's ride, and I will have another video up next week. Bye.